So on the 5-9 homework, we're just going to do the highlighted problems, and I'm going to do some of them with you right now. So let's start out with number 18. The square root of 144, negative 144. So we want to think of that as negative 1 and 144 separately. Now, the square root of negative 1 is going to be an I. Square root of 144 we're going to evaluate like normal, so that is going to be 12i. Now let's jump to 22. Each negative gets counted as an I, so this is going to be the square root of 13 times 26, and we know that it's going to be an I squared. Now let's talk about how we can evaluate 13 and 26. 13 goes into 26 two times, so that's very helpful because the square root of 13 squared is 13. So that's going to be 13. And then the I squared is going to become a negative 1 because we've learned earlier that I squared is equivalent to negative 1. And then we still have a 2 stuck inside of the square root. Let's try together number 28. So the first thing you see when you see an I to a power on it, we know it reduces down to either I squared, which is negative 1, I cubed, which is negative I, or I to the fourth, which is 1. Well, the way that we're going to handle that is we're going to divide 38 by 4 and look at what the remainder is. So since there are 2 remaining, this is equivalent to I squared. And what is I squared equal to? Well, I squared is equal to negative. Now let's go ahead and do a multiplication. Well, I think you're okay for addition and subtraction. Let's do a multiplication. Let's do 36. So the first thing we're going to do is distribute the 6, just like any multiplication. That's going to be 6 plus 6i. Now distribute the negative 2i. We get negative 2i minus 2i squared. Now I squared should never be left in the problem. That is equivalent to negative 1. So that's really negative 2 times negative 1. So we really have here 6 plus 6i minus 2i plus 2. And then we can combine those two are like terms. Those two are like terms for a final answer of 8 plus 4i. We're going to skip some of the division ones. We'll do those when we get into the next lesson. But I do want to do 42. Let's multiply the first two and just hold this last one. So if we distribute, first let's distribute the negative 5. We get negative 30 plus 5i. Now distribute the 2. We get 12i minus 2i squared. Now, let's reduce all of that. Okay, so that is really negative 30 plus 5i plus 12i. Now remember what happens. That I squared becomes negative 1, multiplies whatever it's touching by negative 1, so negative 2 times negative 1 is plus 2. And so that really is going to end up being negative 30 plus 2 is negative 28. 5i plus 12i is 17i. And now we still have that 4 plus 3i we got to deal with. So let's distribute again. This time, we're going to distribute the negative 28. So we're going to do negative 28 times 4. which is negative 112. And then we're going to do negative 28 times 3i, which is a negative 114i. Then we're going to do 17i times 4, because I'm going to distribute the 17i. That's plus 68i. And then 17i times 3i is plus 51i squared. Okay. Now what does that become? Well, that becomes negative 112 plus 114i plus 68i. Now remember what this happens. That's 51 times negative 1, because I squared is always replaced with negative 1. And so we get negative 51. And then combine our like terms. Negative 112 minus 51 is negative 163. And then 14 i's plus 16 i's is a total of 82 i's. Okay? Now, in our videos, we did not do many like these ones here in our initial lesson. So now I would like to do some of those together, okay? So I'm going to do 48. To solve an equation like this, we're going to proceed like we would any other equation. So we're going to get, subtract 5 from both sides. Divide by 5. Now, in the past, we knew that to get rid of that square, we could square root both sides. Please remember to put a plus or minus symbol in front. So x is going to be plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Now what is negative 1? Now every negative 1 gets evaluated and gets written as an I. And so that is going to be plus or minus I. So that is 48. Let's go ahead and do 54. So the first thing you want to do is subtract 30 from both sides. Now, let's talk about getting rid of this 2/3. To get rid of 2/3, multiply each side by the reciprocal of 2/3, or 3/2. Okay? So what do we get? Well, we get that x squared is negative 90 over 2. Now, we're going to do exactly what we did up here in green. We're going to square root both sides and put a plus or minus. So this is going to be plus or minus the square root of 90 over 2. Oh gosh, I can divide 90 by 2. Duh. 90 divided by 2 is 45. So that's going to be negative 45. All right, that could have done that. Now let's evaluate that. Since 45 is negative, so take out the negative, break up 45. That's 9 times 5. Okay. Our final answer is plus or minus. We're going to evaluate the 9 and the negative. The square root of 9 is 3. The negative becomes an I. The 5 is stuck inside. So this is our final answer. Plus or minus 3i, square root of 5. I just wanted to see a few equations. And then I think the problems at the bottom are pretty cool, so I wanted you to see them. It says, what values, or find the values of m and n that make each equation true. So let's look. In the 5-9 notes, we discussed how the real parts get added together and the imaginary parts get added together. So let's start with 56. Let's highlight the real parts. Those have to be equal. And then let's highlight the non-real parts, and those have to be equal. So look at what we get. We get two very simple equations. We get 8 has to equal 2m, and 15i has to equal 3ni. So how do you think we solve? Well, this first equation, divide both sides by 2. You found m. This second equation, We need n by itself, so let's take off a 3i from both sides, and we get 5 equals n. Pretty simple, right? Now let's apply that again. I'm going to do 58 with you. I want you to do 60. So what do we got? Well, the real parts have to be equal. So that's our first equation. 2m plus 5 has to equal negative 2. And now our imaginary parts have to equal. So 1 minus n I has to equal 4i. Well, we can immediately divide both sides by I, so we get 1 minus n equals 4. Now, there are two simple standard equations. Let's solve them. So first, let's solve the 2m plus 5 equals negative 2. Let's subtract 5 from both sides. Divide by 2. Since it doesn't divide by 2 evenly, just leave it as a fraction. Okay? Let's do this one. Let's subtract 1 from both sides. Divide by negative 1. We got it. N has to be negative 3. So there you go. There's a touch of your homework. I hope that helped you. Please finish up any ones that are highlighted that we haven't done together, and make sure you get that submitted by the deadline. That's it. Thank you. Bye.